The robber calmly entered the BP service station at Valentine just before 10 last night. Armed with a 12-centimetre blade, he demanded the attendant hand over the contents of the cash drawer. After completely emptying the till of notes, the robber then demanded cigarettes. Not completely satisfied, he then turned his attention to the gold coins. Police have praised the way the attendant dealt with the situation.
She behaved in a very good manner. She complied with any request that was put to her by the offender, and no doubt that's made things a lot better for her.
The attendant was unharmed. The thief made his escape on foot. Police were on the scene within a matter of minutes, but have so far been unable to track the man down. He's described as 170 centimetres tall, in his late teens, of medium build, last seen dressed in a grey balaclava and a blue Bad Boys t-shirt.
And on the back was a large cross. It appears as though it's a distinctive sort of shirt, and that we're hoping that somebody out there may have knowledge of somebody who owns a similar type of shirt or have seen the offender.
Anyone with information should contact Lake Macquarie detectives. Phil Hind, NBN News. The former Wirroona Crippled Children's Holiday Home has been closed since 1993. Now a developer wants to demolish it and build 30 units on the prime lakefront site. Local residents say the proposal is inappropriate for the area.
We are in an extremely sensitive area, that we're sensitive from the point of view of the heritage and historic aspect, and also from the environmental degradation aspect.
The residents have found an ally in the National Trust. The development is next door to two heritage homes, one Benell built in 1895. In a letter to Lake Macquarie Council, the National Trust describes the unit block as entirely inappropriate in terms of scale and density.
This certainly requires responsibility on the part of council and the developers to ensure that their development is in keeping with this type of area.
Lake Macquarie Mayor John Kilpatrick says the development will be assessed on its merits. Public submissions on the development application close on Wednesday. Phil Hind, NBN News. In comparison to the hundreds of satellites circling the Earth, FedSat-1, as it's to be known, will be tiny, just 50 kilograms. Taking up 5 kilograms of that payload will be equipment to measure the Earth's magnetic field. It's the long-awaited dream of researchers at Newcastle University's Space Plasma Waves Group.
We've tried on 4 earlier occasions to get spacecraft missions going, and they've all fallen by the wayside. But this one is successful, it's been funded, and we've got the green light to go ahead as of yesterday.
The satellite program will cost $20 million. The university's component, a magnetometer, is worth $600,000. It will orbit the Earth at about 1,000 kilometres. Aside from pure scientific research, such as studying what's known as space weather, it will have direct benefits, especially for the mining industry.
The mineral exploration industry needs to know what the Earth's magnetic field is in the Australian region, and therefore if we can measure that very easily with a spacecraft moving across every 90 minutes, then we can provide a reference field for them.
Although it's yet to be designed and built, FedSat-1 is due for liftoff in the year 2001. Militancy gave way to merriment on the picket line this afternoon as the union put on a picnic day for striking miners and their families, watched at a discreet distance by mine security. With the dispute over enterprise bargaining set to enter its 6th week, the union says the resolve of workers is rock solid.
The families have formed a very strong bond whilst this dispute has been running, and it's the union's responsibility to see that we stick by them.
The union says it has the finances to support the 400 striking miners and their families for the duration. Veterans of past battles with the mines management today added to the fighting fund.
Many a battle we've had, and severe battles, but this one is organised very well. That's why I think they'll win, and they've got to win.
The federal government has labelled the strike as un-Australian after the union wrote to the mines customers suggesting they buy coal elsewhere.
That's a ridiculous statement, and I think the Prime Minister should be ashamed of himself for even uttering it.
The dispute goes back before the Industrial Relations Commission on Monday, when the company will seek orders to allow trains to cross the picket line and load coal for export. Phil Hind, NBN News.
It was business as usual at the motel today, despite the harrowing events of the night before.
About 4:30am this morning, two males, both wearing balaclavas and armed with firearms, have gone to the reception area of the Lakeside Motor Inn at Warners Bay.
They searched the office for cash and then went upstairs to the owner's residence. John Gillette was woken by his wife's screams. Grabbing a rifle, he raced to her room but was met in the hallway by a man with a shotgun. A tragedy was averted when Mr Gillette ended the standoff by handing over his unloaded rifle.
We certainly don't recommend that persons arm themselves and confront offenders. It's a very, very dangerous practice.
While his wife was bound and gagged, Mr Gillette was forced back into his room to unload a safe. The couple were tied together and watched helplessly as their house was ransacked. The two bandits fled, the hour-long ordeal finally over when Mrs Gillette freed herself and her husband and raised the alarm. Both were shaken but unharmed. Police are looking for two men, one aged 25 to 30, tall and with a thin build and brown wavy hair, wearing a blue checkered jacket, black jeans, gloves and a balaclava. The second man is 28 to 30 years old, of medium height with dark hair. He was dressed in black and was also wearing a balaclava and gloves. Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
Picked originally as a reserve, 21-year-old Mark Willis is gearing up for his biggest break yet, but it may come at the cost of his Suzuki teammate Troy Bayliss, who broke his wrist while qualifying for the weekend's round of the Australian Superbike Series. While it did little to slow Bayliss in the two races yesterday at Adelaide, the pair still chased the Kawasaki of series leader Marty Craggle, who eventually won both events. However, Willis did allow Bayliss to slip into second to keep his Riders' Championship hopes alive. Bayliss and Willis sit 2 and 3 respectively on the championship, behind Craggle with just one event to race. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Representatives from the RTA, Freight Corp, local police and Moree Council inspected the level crossing on the Newell Highway this morning. Since early last month, 2 people have died at the crossing in separate crashes. The first, an elderly man killed after his four-wheel drive was shunted by a freight train to a rail bridge. The second, a 20-year-old soldier from Queensland who died when his car slammed into the side of a train. After a meeting at Moree Council, agreement that upgrading work should begin as soon as possible.
There will be power to the site within a fortnight with street lighting over the crossing, and the Rail Access Authority will be putting bells and flashing lights there within 3 months.
The approaches to the crossing from both the north and south are right-angle bends, giving motorists only limited time to spot trains, especially at night. Rail authorities say they'll do what they can to minimise the risks.
They will attempt to keep trains within daylight, but as required, from time to time we will need to run the occasional train at night.
However, rail authorities say the onus for safety still rests with motorists. For the Moree Council, the upgrade of the crossing is welcome, but long overdue.
It's disappointing that we've had to have 2 deaths there, along with the other accidents at that site before work, really starts to commence.
Phil Hind, NBN News.
More than 2 months after BHP announced the decision to quit steelmaking in Newcastle, John Howard arrived in the city to listen and learn. Mr Howard met a delegation of union leaders to hear their concerns. BHP bosses then given their chance, before the PM was given a tour of the steelworks. But there were more camera crews than steelworkers, just a few men getting the opportunity to talk with the Prime Minister. After 5 minutes, it was all over. The Prime Minister whisked away in a minibus. Workers not convinced it'll make any difference.
All you read every day, people getting laid off everywhere in this country in every sector of jobs. And the training they're going to give me, people already out there got that training.
There was more hope from Newcastle's community leaders who met with the Prime Minister over lunch. A chair was left vacant for union leader Maury Rudd, who led the fight to save the steelworks but is now battling cancer. John Howard emerged from the meeting with optimism and a $3.3 million bonus for the region. It includes a campaign to sell the city to the rest of Australia, the creation of training positions, a centre to help establish recycling businesses and the rehabilitation of Lake Macquarie.
I think what we now have is a constructive community understanding of the problem, a united determination to go forward.
I think they're terrific projects because they symbolise where we want to head.
These funds will be now to market the region domestically, and we're very excited about it.
The $25 million Hunter Advantage Fund, created by the state government and supported by its federal counterpart and BHP, looks likely to be spent on one big project. The future of Newcastle's Still River plan is less certain. The proposal for a light manufacturing area with trade concessions put into the too hard basket.
All I'm saying is that you can't decide that in isolation from national economic policy.
The Prime Minister will continue his visit tomorrow with a tour of the proposed site for the assembly of the British Aerospace lead-in fighter. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Since the Australian Submarine Corporation ceased work in February, the slipways at Tomago have been idle. Now the company is negotiating to sell the site to a Raymond Terrace businessman who has plans to produce a fleet of high-tech fishing trawlers for Micronesia. Mr Connors claims the venture will succeed because there's no need to sell the boats for a profit.
Our money is in the contract with the fishing company overseas, the revenue that these vessels will make.
Together with an unnamed shipbuilder in the Hunter and some US investment, Mr Connors is planning to build 60 fishing and supply boats designed specifically for the tuna industry. Some of the longline fishing vessels are valued at around $2 million each, others at $3 million. They will all be restricted to Micronesian waters. It'll take around 5 years to build the ships, and Mr Connors says that once they're finished, there'll be plenty of other vessels to work on.
With our vessels on show in the world scene, we believe that we will get orders from overseas.
After 18 months of negotiations, the project is set to begin in 4 weeks' time with 100 employees. Sarah Griffiths, NBN News. The driver of this refrigerated semi-trailer was making a right-hand turn from the Pacific Highway into the New England when his vehicle overturned just outside the Oak restaurant. The impact ruptured a fuel tank, leaking diesel onto the road. Firefighters worked with a hazardous materials unit to clean up the spill and prevent it from seeping into nearby drains.
We're also worried about we have some dairy products on the vehicle, and if we have problems with them leaking into the river, we also have a problem with the local fishing industry.
Emergency crews made sure any leaks were contained and checked nearby drainage outlets. The driver was shaken but unharmed. Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
Earlier this year, the Australian government called for submissions to design the new Australian embassy in Berlin. Impressively, the Newcastle firm Suitors Architects was among the 6 companies shortlisted. Brian Suitors is well known in the region and can be credited with the restoration of many buildings in the area, including the old Bond store, the Civic Theatre and the Regional Museum. If successful, it will be a coup for the only regional company on the shortlist.
To represent your country abroad, to be able to say, well, I was the architect involved in doing the embassy building in Berlin, that's really outstanding.
Brian Suitors recently returned from Berlin, where he surveyed the disused heritage buildings, which were last used as the publishing headquarters for East Germany.
Our task is, first of all, to recognise the heritage significance and to enhance that. Then the brief says that we have to be innovative.
The announcement of the successful tenderer is expected within the month. Antonia Kidman, NBN News.
It's not so long ago that when a horse became seriously lame, it had to be put down. But that sad and sometimes costly fate has been put to rest as veterinary care has improved. Nowhere more so than in Muswellbrook, where the veterinary hospital is soon to start construction on Australia's first equine podiatry and lameness centre.
We don't claim to be any smarter than the next veterinarian down the road. What we do have that they don't have is the individuals coalesced in one area to be able to handle specific cases that in a lot of instances might very well get away from them.
Situated in Australia's premier horse breeding region, the hospital began offering podiatry services last October. It's unique because it offers the expertise of a therapeutic farrier, a board-certified specialist surgeon and diagnosticians, all under one roof.
The veterinarian thinks he's a mechanic and he's not, and the farrier thinks he's a veterinarian and he's not. So when you can get the personalities together that know what needs to be done, then you wind up with a system that works.
The facility will move into an adjoining business which will be restored.
With the extra lameness and podiatry cases, we're to a point of overflow, so we need to have the extra facility.
A shed at the end will be replaced with stables where the horses will receive post-operative care. For the first time, vet students and farriers can undertake internships with accommodation to be built upstairs. By sharing their knowledge, this team of experts hopes to see more lameness centres established across Australia. Simone Cobb, NBN News. The Hunter region and the Central Coast have always been prime areas for growing vegetables, but in recent times many small growers have been finding it difficult to survive. The Hunter Economic Development Corporation believes the answer lies in Asia, where more than $10 billion in fruit and vegetables are imported each year.
If the Hunter and the Central Coast are to succeed in this market, then there needs to be a change in what our farmers grow. Vegetables like squash and pumpkin aren't needed in Asia, but there is a demand for onions, broccoli, cabbage and soybean, and that's just some of them.
Today in Maitland, growers, market representatives and the relevant government departments met to promote the potential of the Hunter and the Central Coast.
Well, today I think is more an expressions of interest of people who wish to be involved in this project and to take it to some of those further stages like, how are we going to finance a processing outlet, whereabouts it's going to be sourced, who's going to grow the product, how we're going to grow it.
Agricultural Minister Richard Amery says the state government supports the push for the two regions to snare a slice of the Asian market.
Sure, there are things like, for example, labour costs are somewhat higher in Australia than, for example, in China or sometimes with the United States and so on. But the speakers here today at the seminar are identifying other strengths that Australia does have.
Rio Tinto's announcement that it was prepared to talk struck the first crack in the 6-week-old stalemate at the Hunter Valley No. 1 mine. But while the unions called it a breakthrough yesterday, today they attacked a draft collective agreement drawn up by the company.
We're quite angry about it. We believe that the document represents nothing more than a publicity stunt.
Rio Tinto offered miners a $170 a week wage increase in exchange for an overhaul of union-controlled work practices. But the union says the company is misleading the public on the dispute's real issues, which are not about money or work practices.
We have a mandate from our rank and file members that says everything is on the table. That has been the case now for over 2 years. For the company to come out and say that there is a number of alleged workplace restrictions that they are unable to negotiate is a complete lie.
The union claims Rio Tinto wants exclusive control of work practices. They say the document contains no guarantees on job security, manning levels or hiring and firing, and that they're not prepared to sign a blank cheque. A company spokesperson gave little comment today, except to say that since they agreed to negotiate while miners remained on strike, they should have no problem moving coal through the picket line.
If they're serious about negotiations, then they won't order trains.
As the same issues continue to rage unresolved, it seems the dispute has come full circle, with both sides to meet once more in the Industrial Relations Commission on Monday. Simone Cobb, NBN News. Corrective Services was ready and waiting for a confrontation with the renowned black activist as they barred the normally unguarded entrance to Cessnock Jail. Taking no chances, authorities demanded identification from drivers before allowing vehicles through. But it was not the same treatment for Lorenzo Irvin when he finally arrived.
I think it's outrageous. I think that there's no justification for this sort of thing at all.
The Regional Commander of Corrective Services, Ken Middlebrook, then came down to reiterate their position.
I don't believe that your visit to the institution is in the best interest of Cessnock Correctional Centre, and as such I'm not permitted to allow it to go ahead.
Mr Irvin wanted to visit Dennis Walker, who he claims is internationally recognised as a political prisoner. It's believed Mr Walker is serving a 4-year sentence for an armed offence. At Nimbin 2 years ago, he grabbed a policeman's gun and fired it into a ceiling while trying to protect a sacred Aboriginal tree. His sentence has been described as excessively harsh.
We believe that Mr Walker is in fact the Nelson Mandela of Australia.
Although convicted of hijacking a plane in America almost 30 years ago, Mr Irvin has no record in Australia. But according to authorities, his criminal record is not the problem, it's his political beliefs. Mr Middlebrook says the jail doesn't want activists coming and creating problems for us with the behaviour of inmates. Disappointed but not defeated, Mr Irvin vowed to take the matter to court. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
Newcastle turned on a near-perfect day for the 8th Olympic Journey Parade, one of 24 to be staged around the nation before Christmas. Spectators took up every vantage point along the route to take in the spectacle and share in some Olympic spirit.
Starting to build it. I mean, the bid sort of shot it up right up there, and then, this is adding to that.
Joining the throng of dancers, marching bands and flag bearers were Olympians past and present. Among them, Seoul Olympics 200-metre swimming sensation Duncan Armstrong.
I can't believe it's a whole 3 years away. The euphoria is already building, and we've only just started the countdown. We've just forgotten about Atlanta only now.
Today's parade also had added significance for local Olympian, Atlanta softballer Natalie Ward.
We didn't really get one in Newcastle here, so this is practically it for me, so it's really good.
While the flags of 197 Olympic nations filled the streets with colour, the parade also had a distinctly Australian feel. The real crowd favourites, though, were the Olympic mascots, Sid, Millie and Ollie. Mingling with the 25,000-strong crowd lining the footpaths was Olympics Minister Michael Knight.
The message we want people to go away with is it's their games. They might take place in Sydney, but they belong to all of Australia. They belong to the Hunter as much as to anybody in Sydney.
The Olympic journey winds its way to Coffs Harbour and Tamworth next weekend. Phil Hind, NBN News.
It seems losing your job in the Hunter can mean developing a variety of health problems.
This includes high levels of depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, greater prevalence of alcohol abuse, suicide and smoking-related illnesses.
Dr Joe Kostorich is the AMA's national spokesperson for GPs. He says Hunter doctors are seeing more unemployed patients suffering from illnesses and believes the closure of the steelworks will add to the problem.
These people are going to need additional help with health problems, and that needs to be first of all recognised, and we've got to get away from this stigma that is wrongly applied to unemployed people.
The Hunter Urban Division of General Practice has joined forces with the AMA, urging governments to stop ignoring the many health problems associated with unemployment. They're calling for a number of measures to be introduced, including a national task force.
Unemployment is not, despite all government promises, going to go away, and whilst it's with us, we need to be helping those people.
And while public hospitals may not be popular, the AMA claims services provided by local GPs are.
We've got endorsement to the tune of 94% are satisfied with their GP, but ultimately there are times when people do need to be in hospital, and the battle then for the GP to get those services for those people who need it is a huge one.